So thank you everybody for joining me today. I'm going to talk about service, more the front of the house type of concerns we have for food safety today. And I think this is the shortest chapter in the book. So this is going to be a real quick lecture. There's just not as much to it today. All the chapters after this are longer. Like the pest control chapter has a lot of information in it. The one about food management systems, that chapter is longer. This one is short. So since others are longer, let's just enjoy the short one. And we'll get going and get out of here early today, probably. So this is, from a manager's point of view, this is kind of a harder topic because when we're in the back of the house, we're professionals. We know what we're doing. But we're in the front of the house, there's servers, and I'm not saying the servers are intentionally wanting to do anything bad. It's just to be a server, often you don't have, this is someone's first entry point into the industry. So you get hired with no experience, often you'll become a server. And if you do that, you still have to handle food safely because you are handling food to some extent, but you don't necessarily have the background. So as a manager, this is an area you really have to pay attention to. So the first thing we're going to talk about is holding food. So holding food is like putting it out on a buffet, or you've got it in the back in a steam kept in a soup well, or in the steam table or something like that. And the rules here, again, we're trying to avoid the temperature danger zone. I accidentally advanced the slide. So what we're trying to do is keep food either above 41 degrees or below, we want to keep it below 41 degrees or above 135 degrees. So hot food, 135 or hotter, cold food, 41 or below. And we want to check the temperature at a minimum of every 4 hours. So if you do it every 4 hours, if you go there and the food is not in the correct temperature range, you have to throw it out because you don't, if you haven't checked in the last 4 hours and you have 4 hours where it can be in the temperature danger zone, you have to assume, well, it's always been in the wrong temperature. So in actuality, you should check the temperature more often. And, if you check it every 2 hours, then that gives you time to do a corrective action. And anybody want to speculate on what I mean by a corrective action? Because you'll get questions on the serve safe. They'll say, blah, 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 which of the following is a corrective action? What do you think that would be?
Remove that from the holding area and reheat it in the kitchen?
Exactly. So if I have a sheet pan full of lasagna, or I have a hotel pan full of lasagna on the steam table, and I check the temp and it's 130 degrees, I take it, I reheat it, I bring it back up to temperature, and then I put it back out. So the corrective action is the thing that gets it back into that, the zone it's supposed to be. Hey, Lily, how are you?
Good, sir.
Good. So some guidelines for holding hot food or holding TCS food, which is temperature control for safety. So this is food. These are things that have that potential to become harmful. So anything with eggs, milk, protein like meat and stuff in it. So first one, never use hot holding equipment to reheat food. So this is a problem that I see at a lot of restaurants. They have food, maybe something left over from yesterday, that it's a buffet restaurant, and they take the food out of the cooler, and they, it's 10 in the morning. They don't open until 11:30. They take the food out of the cooler, they put it in the steam table and turn the steam table all the way up, thinking that by 11:30 when they open, well, the food will be hot. That is a critical health violation. You cannot use holding equipment to heat food. You can't use a soup well to heat up your soup. You can't use a steam table to heat up your food. That equipment is designed to keep the food hot. It is not designed to heat cold food up. In all likelihood, your food is going to be in the temperature danger zone too long if you do that. It's just those things use general heat, and they're just not going to get it up to temperature fast enough. When you're holding food, you want to heat it to the correct temperature, then move it to the whatever you're going to use to hold it. Throw your food out after a predetermined amount of time. So if you're going to have the food out, you're holding it hot, after 4 hours or whatever the time is, you throw it away. Because especially food that's been sitting on a buffet for 4 hours, I can guarantee you that food is contaminated. If you just think about the way people behave at buffets, and you think about maybe there's cold airflow over it, and here we're always had the air conditioner running. Food sitting out, it's going to be in the temperature danger zone. So after the correct amount of time, be sure and throw it out. And then we have to cover our food with sneeze guards. If it's out, it has to have a sneeze guard on it, and or a cover. So you can have a cover on it, or you can have a sneeze guard. And has anyone ever seen this? You're at back when we had salad bars that were open to the public. So we don't have that right now. But has anyone ever seen someone who walks up the salad bar and sticks their head under the sneeze guard to look at the food? Has anyone ever seen that? You've seen that, Butch? Yeah, it's that's destroying the whole purpose of why it's there when people behave that way. Let's see. So let's say we have food and we're not gonna, we're in a situation where we don't have a way to heat it or cool it. So if we have cold food, we can actually hold it without refrigeration for up to 6 hours if, now these are two big ifs. It has to be 41 degrees before it goes out. And 2, it can't get above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So we put food out, as long as it never gets above 70, we can actually hold it out for 6 hours. But I have here's the question. How hot is it here in South Georgia? If you put food out on a buffet, it's going to be above 70 degrees. It just is. And so that's going to be really hard to maintain, especially here locally. So the rules for holding food for up to 6 hours, 41 degrees Fahrenheit before it goes out, and never gets above 70 degrees. So that also means you're going to have to take temperatures regularly to make sure it never gets above 70 degrees. Other things you have to have a label on it saying what time it came out of refrigeration. Since we are we're not cheating here, but we're kind of bending the rules, saying, hey, it can get up to 70. And then, so we have to have the time it was removed from refrigeration and the time it has to be thrown out. And it has to be either sold, served, or thrown out within 6 hours. Those are your guidelines. Let's see. So we can hold hot food without any way to heat it up. It's hot when it came out. We can hold it for up to 4 hours if it was 135 before it went out. It has a label specifying what time it has to be thrown out. And it's either sold, served, or thrown out within 4 hours. So cold food, you have 6 hours as long as it never gets above 70. Hot food, you have 4 hours. And this is in situations where we don't have equipment to maintain the temperature. So imagine that you have a buffet, you're setting up somewhere remotely, maybe a catering situation. You put a tray out of cold cuts. That tray of cold cuts can sit out, if you've taken it out of the refrigerator, it's been handled properly, up to 6 hours if it never gets above 70 degrees. If it gets above 70, then you have to go to the 4 hour rule. Preventing contamination. Some places you can have bare hand contact for food, but for the most part, the whole idea of bare hand contact for food has gone away. We don't allow that anymore, and it's probably for the best. So to prevent contamination when serving food, we want to handle the food not with our bare hands. So you handle it with gloves. You handle it with tongs. You can use a spoon or something like that. You can use a deli sheet. And what a deli sheet is if you go to a grocery store and they have the counter where you can pull out a bagel or a donut, and they have a little piece of parchment paper, that's a deli sheet. So that's also that's a sanitary way to handle food. You want to clean and sanitize your utensils that are going to be used for serving. So each kind of food gets its own utensil. So you can't have one spoon that's used for multiple things. I don't know if anyone else has ever run into this, but when I go into the cafeteria here, sometimes they don't have enough ladles for all the different salad dressings. And you're not supposed to share them between salad dressings because maybe one of those was put out an hour ago and one of those was put out 4 hours ago. And you could cross-contaminate and cause the other food to become contaminated. And you want to clean and sanitize your utensils after each task. So that means, if you're serving food and you switch to something else, clean and sanitize utensils. Now, where this really gets, sometimes these rules are hard to enforce. And I'll give you an example of something I ran into. It depends on your health inspector and how hard they're going to go after sticking to the rules. I was running a restaurant in a national park, and the health inspector was a federal health inspector, which is pretty unusual. And pretty much it was impossible to use a slicer and meet the letter of the law, because the slicer had to be disassembled, cleaned, and sanitized between everything you sliced. And so if I made a ham sandwich and then went back, 1 minute later, made another ham sandwich, I was supposed to disassemble, clean, and sanitize that slicer between every use. And, that's really, really difficult. But normally things aren't, health inspectors aren't that, they aren't that strict. Let's see. We want to store utensils correctly between uses. So if you go in a cafeteria and they've got ladles, say in the soup, we have a cup, or in a salad bar, you've got the ladle sitting in the salad dressing. There are a couple proper ways that we can do this. One, we can have something like a plate out there that's been cleaned and sanitized, and you can set the ladle on that, or on a tray, or something that's been cleaned and sanitized. You do not set the ladle on the counter. Just, you don't do that. So you can put it on a clean and sanitized food contact surface, or you can leave the ladle in the food. So it's acceptable to leave the salad dressing ladle sitting in the salad dressing, as long as the handle is not touching the food, so that someone can come in and grab the handle without contaminating the food. That's a perfectly acceptable way to do it. So some guidelines for how to handle glasses and plates. So let's say I have a whole bunch of glasses. We've got some pictures here. On the right, we've got the guy carrying a bunch of glasses, and it says wrong. What's wrong with what he's doing? It says wrong. Why is that wrong?
Well, he's touching the part of the glass people are going to be drinking from.
Well, on the bottom one, yeah, he's touching the surface. That's part of it. What else is wrong?
Probably going to chip some glass like that if it's glassware.
Yeah, you are absolutely going to break some glasses if you do that. So you could get glass in someone's glass. You're going to chip it, and also the inside of the surface we know is clean and sanitary. We're not as sure about the outside. So now we've got non-food contact surfaces and food contact surfaces touching. It's a bad idea. When we serve a glass, we want to be sure to touch the part that the guest is not going to touch with their mouth. That's really important. So never nest your glasses. You're going to break them. You're going to chip them. I just had this discussion with my wife this week, and she broke one of my pint glasses because she nested them. It's like, come on, this is my beer drinking glass, and you broke it. So the next picture down there is a plate. It looks like a chocolate cake on there. What's wrong? What's the server doing wrong in that picture? that says wrong?
Touching the food service
Ag-
surface.
You are absolutely right, Caitlin, that they are touching the surface where the food is with their thumb. So the correct way, you can see on the other picture, is he's got the plate resting, so it's resting on his hand. And the way plates are made, you may not have ever noticed this, but they almost always have a raised ridge on the bottom. And what that's for is so that you can kind of grip it with your finger and your thumb so that you can hold it securely. And so that way you can hold the plate securely without having to, to pinch it with your thumb. Because again, you're touching it where the food is going to go. So potentially that's going to end up in the guest's mouth. Just don't do that. Other things, utensils. So what's the guy doing wrong when he's putting the fork down?
He's touching the part that's going into your mouth.
Yeah, he's touching the food contact surface. That handle is for people to handle it. The ends with the tines, that's the food contact surface. We don't want, I am sure that this server's hands are clean, but I don't know that, absolutely. And I don't want to eat food that he has handled with his finger, where he's touched the fork with his fingers. One of the things that I don't see this very often, but I have actually raised a stink in a restaurant before. Has anyone ever had a server bring in their glass and they're carrying it like this, where they've got their fingers inside the glass? Has anyone ever seen that?
It used to make me so mad when I was serving. I would see people do that all the time, especially bartenders.
Yeah, that is absolutely 100% wrong. You are not supposed to handle that. Anything that's going to touch the guest's mouth, don't do that. And if when I see a server put their fingers inside the glass, it's like, absolutely not. I need to talk to your manager. And I am not that guy who has to talk to someone's manager, but it's like, this is bad. Down on the bottom, we've got the bagel being served. And again, use tongs, don't use your bare hands. Here's the getting glass on the ice machine. Use a scoop. Do not ever scoop out the glass or scoop out the ice with the glass. The glass is going to break and you're going to have you're going to have glass in your ice, and there is no way to pick it out. You're going to have to dump all 500 pounds of ice you have in your ice maker. And that's how much, that's what 300 to 500 pounds is normal for what an ice maker holds. And just because you have one piece of glass in it, one tiny little sliver of glass, it doesn't matter if it's like 1/4 of an inch. If I chip that glass and there's a piece of glass missing, all that ice has got to go, all of it. Other things with that scoop that you use to take the ice out, that has to be stored in an area where it can drain, because it'll be wet, and so it has to be able to drain off so it can dry, and it has to be somewhere that's sanitary. Now, here are some questions I know that you will get. These questions, this is just a popular question for them. Sometimes we have food that comes back that, maybe we worry a little bit, well, what should I do with it? Never reserve food returned by a customer to another customer. So if you're in a restaurant and you have trays of bread and you take the bread out, you put it on the table, and they never even unwrap the napkin off the top of it, they never touch it, doesn't matter. You have to treat that bread as if it's contaminated. You can't reserve it. You can't serve condiments that have been like the little cups of ketchup sometimes you'll get when you go to places. Instead of like the packets, they'll have a little cup where they filled the cup with ketchup. Doesn't matter if they touch it or not, you gotta throw it out. You have to consider it to be contaminated. Anything like a plate garnish, so you got a slice of lemon on the plate just to make it look pretty, gotta throw it out. You can't reserve that stuff. Now, there are a few things that we do reserve that are acceptable. And so that's like a bottle of ketchup or a bottle of mustard. or a condiment packet that's unopened, or a package of crackers that's unopened, that can be reserved. But anything like bread or something like that can't be. And every time bread goes out, like if you have a bread basket, every time that goes out, you should change the linen under it. So fresh napkin every time the bread goes out. Some rules for just the service areas in general. Like I said earlier, we have to have sneeze guards. So if we have self-service areas, so this is like a buffet or a salad bar, we have to have a sneeze guard. It has to be 14 inches above the counter, and it has to come out at least 7 inches over the edge. So the idea is to completely cover the food from any spittle, or if someone were to sneeze or to drop something, the food has to be completely covered and protected. And food out in a self-service area should be labeled. And if you have salad dressings out there, it should have the names of the salad dressings on the ladle handle. So that you know what it is. This is, like I said earlier, this is kind of my pet peeve when I go over to the cafeteria, because a lot of times they don't have enough ladles and they're not labeled. And it's like, I need, I'm getting my French salad dressing or whatever, and I have to snag the Italian ladle out of it. Other things about self-service areas. And self-service areas are things like buffets or salad bars. Hot food, 135 or hotter. Cold food, 41 degrees or colder. If we have raw fish, meat, or poultry, that has to be kept separate from ready to eat food. Right? It has to be in a separate area. Now, so the question is, can anybody imagine a scenario where we would have raw meat or poultry out in a self-service area? Because it took me a long time to figure this out, what they were talking about.
You're like making your own sushi. I don't know anything else.
Well, you're close, but things like a Mongolian barbecue, where you can go and you can select your ingredients and then they cook it. So they have raw meat out there. You select the meat you want and then they cook it for you. So those things, the raw ingredients, the raw meat ingredients, poultry, meat, fish, those have to be separate. Self-service areas, don't let people reuse plates. This is another thing that bugs me. If I have a salad bar, you always have that guest who will take their dirty plate and go back and want to refill it. So if you have a salad bar or a buffet, you need to have someone whose job it is to pay attention to offer to get a clean plate for that guest. You want to have plenty of clean plates out there available so they don't have to ask, so it's not a problem. And you need to have someone who monitors the area. Because again, someone has hepatitis and they've been eating off their plate. And then they take their plate and they go out there and they're going to go get some more whatever they're getting off of the hot buffet. They take the plate, they stick it under the sneeze guard so they can scoop it onto their plate. Well, now whatever's on their plate drips into the food and is contaminated. Now everybody has the potential to get hepatitis or whatever. So yeah, don't let customers reuse dirty plates. And don't use ice as an ingredient if it's been used to keep food cold. So let's say that I'm doing something remote. I'm doing a catering event and I have a cooler full of ice that has my food in it. I cannot use that ice also in drinks. If it's been used to keep food cold or cans cold, I cannot use that ice as an ingredient in food or in a drink. Is anyone in here familiar with how dirty things like cans of Coke or cans of beer are? Has anyone ever seen any of the videos? You have, Butch? What's the concern?
I worked for Anheuser-Busch for 30 years. They don't want anything on the outside of those cans because they go through all kind of stuff.
Yeah, they do. Caitlin, what'd you say?
They're really gross.
They are super gross.
They are, especially the tops.
Yeah, because they've, in all likelihood, they've been sitting in a warehouse somewhere. And that warehouse may have bats, rats, mice crawling all over them. And then you take that, you put it in your mouth. That if you put that on ice, that ice is contaminated. It's nasty. So we don't want to use that ice that's been used to keep things cold as an ingredient. It could be contaminated. Now, if I am going off-site, like doing a catered event, I'm going somewhere and I have to carry the food to me somewhere remotely. There are some guidelines I have to follow. So I need to use a insulated food grade container. So I have to use something like a hot box that's made for food, for transporting food. So I can keep it at the right temperature because I want to get it above 135 degrees and I want to keep it there. The inside of the vehicle should be cleaned regularly. I'll tell you a gross but true story. I was working at a steakhouse, and the owner of the steakhouse opened the steakhouse because he was a cattle farmer. And so this was his way to really showcase his cattle. And we were doing a remote offsite event, and he was going to transport a couple it was like a show. So he's transporting a couple cows, and we were carrying some hot holding equipment. And he started to load the hot boxes into the cattle car because that's where he had space. It's like, absolutely not, because the cattle poop in here. It's like, this is not going to fly. We cannot do that. So yeah, inside of delivery vehicles, we've all seen that car in the parking lot that's full of wrappers and old food and stuff. Just make sure your delivery vehicles are clean. We want to check the internal temperatures to make sure that it's still at the proper temperature when it's served. And we have to label the food. We have to put the date it has to be used by, and we have to put instructions on it for reheating and serving. Because if we're at a remote event, it may be one of those situations where you're doing catering where you're paid to drop food off. Like you're being paid to drop off a pan of, say, lasagna. So you know how to reheat it properly. I know how to reheat it properly, but the person we're leaving it for doesn't. So we have to have the date that it has to be used by, the reheating and the service instructions have to be on it when we're doing food for remote locations. Let's see, other things. Make sure that the service site has the right utility. So if I'm doing a remote catering event, the laws don't change. I am still expected. I have to have somewhere for hand washing and dishwashing. I have to have safe water. These are things that are required. I have to have garbage containers that are away from the food prep area if I'm going out and doing something remote. The law doesn't change just because I'm doing it in a remote location. I have to make sure that I have the right utilities. And again, if I'm doing something off-site, store raw meat, seafood, and poultry away from ready-to-eat food. Like I said, this is going to be a short set of slides. So this is the last slide. And this one is a little different. Vending machines. Now, vending machines, and I'll tell all of you guys, if you're looking for a way to make a living, vending machines are a really interesting option. There are lots of things that can be done with vending machines. And if you think about it, they're great because you don't have to have so much labor. You don't have to have someone who's standing there selling stuff. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, what can I sell out of vending machines? There are vending machines that make pizzas, that make them. There are vending machines that sell whole fresh pecan pies. In China, there are vending machines that sell live crabs, so you can buy them to make crab soup. So there are all sorts of options for vending machines out there, and I encourage you to look at it as a possible career path. But if I have food in a vending machine, one, it has to be checked daily for shelf life. Two, if it's temperature controlled for safety food, so this is things that aren't going to be reheated before they're going to be consumed, we have to keep it at the right temperature. So something like this turkey and cheese sandwich, if I leave it out at room temperature, that turkey is going to go bad. So I have to keep this refrigerated. If it should be dispensed in its original container. And if I have fruit in there, they have to be washed and wrapped before going into the machine. And normally I would never tell you to wash fruit, far before you serve it, because the water, it actually causes it to mold faster and degrade. But if you're going to be serving it in a vending machine, you have to wash it. So that's a requirement. So like I said, this is the shortest chapter and lecture in the book. From here on out, they get longer. So it'll take more time. But this is just a super short chapter. So that's what I've got. So does anyone have any questions before I let you go? about anything food service related, anything that had to do with the practice test that I posted, anything at all while I've got you here? If no questions, then that was just a short class today.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Robertson.
Thank you guys for coming. I hope everybody has a great weekend.
You as well.
Okay.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.